Understand that your inconsistency is confusing and leading you not to be taken seriously. So those mixed signals do create the very behavior that's pissing you off. So first own that. First say, hi, my name's Sue and I'm being inconsistent and it's causing my kids to ignore me. Hi, and welcome back to the Ask Mom podcast, because parenting is everything. I'm Sue, and with me is Randy, and this is your no bullshit, no filter, zero guilt parenting reboot. Whether you're deep in the toddler tantrums, navigating tween or teen drama, or somewhere in between, you'll get clarity and actionable tools one episode at a time. Have you ever felt like your child has selective hearing, like they can hear every whisper about dessert or juicy gossip, but somehow they miss every rule that you've repeated 17 times? If you're feeling ignored by your kids, negotiated with, or flat out hustled by your kids, you might be unintentionally inviting the very behavior that's pissing you off. And that's being heard, but not listened to. And if this feels familiar, this episode is for you. Today, we're asking a question that calls ourselves out, and that's, is it me who's training my kids to ignore me? Am I for sale at bargain basement prices? Am I letting my child talk me into a better deal than the one I said out loud 5 minutes ago? If your child can plead, whine, or talk you into a maybe or a yes after you've already said no, you might be auctioning off your authority without realizing it. Let's break down how that looks, how it happens, and how to stop it so you aren't stuck feeling invisible in your own home. By the end of this episode, you'll know exactly why your child might be ignoring you, how inconsistency erodes trust, and I'll share a 3-step process to rebuild your credibility starting today. Let's get into what being for sale really means and how that gets your kids to ignore you. Here's a pattern that I see all the time with parents. Inconsistency then leads to negotiation from your kids, which then leads to a credibility crash for you. Let's break down what that looks like, how it shows up in your daily life, and what you guys can do instead. If your rules and expectations shift depending on how you feel or how persistent your kid is with whining and deal making, and that's getting results, then it's safe to say that you're leaking leadership. And when that happens, your kids stop taking you seriously. I see it all the time. When kids are allowed to debate an existing rule, parents negotiate away their authority. And this kind of reminds me of an Aristotle quote that I like, which is, a friend to all is a friend to none. When we are for sale with our kids, it blurs the line between parent and friend, which creates confusion. Kids will stop trusting what we say because they don't know what's real anymore and what we expect of them.
I'm actually having a very interesting experience with this right now. My youngest is my son, who's 7.5. And I don't even, almost like you don't even know how it happened. All of a sudden, you're kind of realizing that certain rules you had in place and it just kind of spins out of control. And I think it's easy to say yes to something that kind of seems so minor. And for me, in my experience, it's been that slippery slope. It's usually not a problem if you're saying yes to something right now or for this one time, but it is when it gets to those things that are the slippery slope. And I think YouTube is a great example, right? Today, kids want to watch something on YouTube, and you might say yes to this one video right now in this one moment. And then it becomes, well, maybe just this and this. And that can spin really out of control very quickly. I think social media and YouTube, especially, because you don't know what then the algorithm is going to send your child. And next thing you know, you're like, well, I agreed to this one, but not this one. And the kids are like, but you said I could, kind of thing. Or, a great example as well is, we usually have a rule like no screen time after dinner. And sometimes for whatever reason, dinner is early and it ends early and it's kind of obnoxiously early. And I just, happen to be on a good schedule that day. So I'm like, yeah, it's a little early. You can have the screen time. And then it's like a disaster trying to end the screen time, right? Like a show or watching a TV show or something. And so you're like, you instantly regret that you even said yes to begin with. So like, I'm in this situation now with my son where we're trying to undo a little of that. But I was curious on your thoughts, because sometimes the reason I do say yes is I think to myself, like, maybe I should say yes to more things. Am I being too controlling? I think a lot of parents feel the same way I do. They might think, I don't want to be too rigid. I don't want to be too harsh. So what do you say to parents who might hear this and associate this with maybe being inflexible or authoritarian even? what would you say to parents who are just wondering, like, I want to give flexibility, but I don't want to end up in this situation?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is really nailing parents' day-to-day life. And I do recall, out of the four kids we have, I had my oldest was the guy that kept me. I basically had to parent him like a robot because if I was feeling generous one day and was a little bit more relaxed on my rules, like I was exploited. And if I was in a bad mood and I just didn't want to put up with any crap, and I'm like, just do it because I said, I was exploited there too. I was like, he, even 4 and 5 years old, was like holding me accountable to my mood every single day. And then as he got older, that turned into him really, with his confidence, finding ways to see where there was a window of opportunity. And so you know, overall, as a parent, inconsistency is really what does us in. But yet we're also human and our day has to kind of ebb and flow. We're not robots. So I've got a couple of answers that I think will sort of split that difference. But overall, as parents, I would say that saying what you mean and meaning what you say isn't harsh, but it is building trust because your child will learn to rely on what you're saying. That builds the respect in the relationship. And when your kids know that your words have meaning, they won't ignore you and they will start to take you seriously. They won't push back as much. However, when it comes to making rules, one of the things that I have found that is one of the most successful techniques that I teach, and it also played out successfully in our family with four kids. And that rule is that, have very few rules, but enforce those that you do have 100% of the time. That does probably sound rigid, that does sound impractical, but it's not because we're talking about just a few rules. You're actually making your life a lot less complicated because after you're done enforcing and communicating just those two or three rules, no more than that, there's a ton of wiggle room in there for you to be able to let your child have some YouTube time, if you've had dinner early or, whatever your situation is, it gives you that authority to make those decisions as time goes on. So, you can be flexible by the day. But overall, this rule of having very few rules but enforcing them 100% of the time means that you have your yeses and your nos decided ahead of time. So you want to make them clear. You want to say them loud and proud. And then you've got to follow through so your kids always know where you stand on any topic. And that means kind of sitting down with yourself and knowing what is important to me. And we're going to get to that here, in a bit. But if your kids plead and negotiate with you, it sends them the message, oh, hey, my rules are flexible if you just push me hard enough. Now, there is a time to negotiate, okay? There is a time where you can have these sort of training, I call them training conversations, and it's before your rules are set. So when you involve your kids in creating the agreements between you, it gets their buy-in to the rule, and then they're more willing to follow it. But once the boundary is drawn, it's not up for grabs after that. So being ignored is all about the mixed signals that we send without realizing it. So if our children and we're repeating ourselves and they're not listening and they're ignoring us and they pick and choose what they decide to focus on when we speak, that means that's my sign to me that my child is getting inconsistency from me. So I'm reading my room, I'm reading my child, and I'm saying, all right, this is how he's responding to me when I'm making a rule. Or if I'm asking him to do something and I'm being ignored, I need to see that sign from my child and understand I have to react and respond differently. So I have to come up with a new tactic because what I'm doing is not working. Consistency is one of the toughest muscles to flex in being a parent. And, we've all been there. It's something that we all deal with, every day with kids. But, there were days that I felt like my kid was in charge and I was just the ride home. But the day that you hate caving into your kids more than you hate saying no to them is when the behavior will start to change for you. We shouldn't get used to being ignored. When your words stop meaning something, parenting gets more performative, and then that's when it becomes exhausting. There's also some hidden ways where we start to lose credibility with our kids or to show them that we are for sale on the rules. And sometimes we don't really realize it. And some of those examples would be Are you willing to choose a side in front of your child even when it's unpopular or mocked? Like mocked by the teens, right? With the minute my kids turned 12, if you don't have confidence as a parent of teens, like you're steamrolled. It's all over for you. For me, three boys and a girl, four teens all at the same time. I was like an airport, an airline director. No, okay, you can go here, and I said no. You be home at this time. It was crazy. And if I didn't have confidence in my rules and know what I stood for and know what my yeses and nos were and why and had them communicated to the kids, nobody would have given me the time of day. They just wouldn't have thought that anything I said mattered. Also, are you willing to stand by your values? Do you have values? What are they? Do your kids know what they are? And if you're not standing by your values in front of your kids, they're watching, not just with strangers, but with your own child. They're watching. They're seeing that there's inconsistency there. So in their mind, they're tracking that as an opportunity to negotiate with you and to not listen. And are you able to hold the line with your kids even if they don't understand your why? So sometimes we have answers to the kids that they don't want to hear, and sometimes we don't always feel like explaining it, or maybe it's outside of the realm of what they're able to understand. The biggest one is anything past midnight or past 11, nothing good happens. And
Mm.
of course, that was a rule I fought all the time with my parents, but by God, you get older and you realize that's damn true.
Yeah, that's for
So,
sure.
even though they don't always understand the why, sometimes when you have established that credibility with your kids and that trust, and they take your word for face value, sometimes they might not understand your why, and you might not be able to explain it that phase in life. But the bottom line is you said it, so it needs to be adhered to. So, being a parent isn't about being liked in the moment, even though it does feel good to be liked, but it's about being trusted in the long run. So, that's why we have to make up the rules, stick with the plan, and have that credibility with our kids. Because if your kid sees you wobble every time there's friction, then they learn your boundaries are optional. And when your boundaries are optional, their boundaries become optional. And that's not what we want in the face of peer pressure. If we're wishy washy, then they feel like they can blur those lines for themselves. We are role models. They're watching everything, they're hearing everything, even though they seem like they don't care. You know, there was a mom in one of my workshops who said it best, and this is a great takeaway, I think, for the listeners is she said, I walked back my own limit to keep things calm, and that taught my kids exactly how to keep doing it. So they kept pushing. She just wanted the calm, she just wanted the peace and the happiness in that moment. But then that by default was teaching the kids that to keep the peace, she's for sale. She's going to walk back what she said. And if I just keep pushing, I'm going to win something here.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely been there as well. And that's sometimes a lot of times when I do say yes when normally it's no, it's exactly that. It's just to keep the peace. So I definitely feel that. And I think a lot of people listening will probably understand that as well. I really liked how you said with the values, you mentioned standing by your values, even if it creates tension. What I have done, and I think it kind of helps too, is sometimes just calling it out, especially when kids are comparing you or your family to what we do versus what these other kids do. And sometimes I just call it out, especially with my oldest. She's almost 11. So I said, sometimes it's just a difference in values. And we value XYZ. Your friends might value XYZ. And I think that helps for those situations. And also, I think I'm thinking and wondering, like, if they kind of respect it more. They're like, oh yeah, and for me, a lot of it comes down to like money. And when people are, they might spend their money doing something I wouldn't. And I said, well, that's just a simple value system. And I think it helps put it into perspective of like, even if I did have the money for that, like I probably wouldn't spend it on that. And I think it sort of teaches kids your rules and values kind of at the same time. And I found that to be pretty helpful as well.
That's a great point. That's a beautiful way to explain why you've made a rule. And yes, values are important, but when we take the time to explain that and we give them that why, but we also stand for something and we show something is important to us, then they then are free to create what's important to them, and they're learning from us. They're learning that we stand for something. They're learning that we're not looking our confidence is in the culture that we've created in our home and the rules and value system that we've created with among each other. And we're not willing to deviate from that. And I think that's an important lesson for the kids to see every day, that that value system is what carries us and helps us stay on our path. And they'll also do the same when faced with, those types of challenges. So like if you found yourself giving in and you want to repair your credibility after you've already caved, let's talk about some ways that can move us back into credibility with our kids so they start, believing in us and stop ignoring us.
So, for parents who feel like they've been too lenient up to this point, or they feel like it's even a little too late, I've already messed up, or they're struggling to just to be consistent with their kids, what is your advice to them if they want to stop negotiating now and start establishing better rules and boundaries?
I think I could answer that with an example of one of the moms that I've worked with. She had a teenager, and of course, a lot of having rules and standing by what we believe in, and all of that reinforcement really comes to light with preteens and teens. So if we don't have that locked down in the early years and the credibility is lost, we have to find a way to grab that back, especially before they become full-blown teenagers. We all know that, right? An example kind of comes to mind where a mom was her teen was told the rule was you can't go to concerts during the school week. And so, the mom heard her daughter say, Mom, all my friends are going to XYZ concert tonight and I really want to go. And the mom came back with, no, no concerts during the week, remember? And the teen came back and said, but mom, all my friends are going. I'll get all my work done early and I have a ride there and back. And she started to come up with all the reasons why she should be able to go. And the mom again says, no. Then the teen pulls out all the stops and pulls out the guilt. And she says, I'm the only one of my friends not going. And I'll be up for school on time in the morning. And she's coming up with all these reasons why she should be able to go after the mom has now said no twice. And this objection, finally, the guilt, that works. So the mom now starts to say, okay, you can go to the concert during the middle of the week, but you can't go anywhere after. You have to come right home. So the mom opened the door to negotiation, and the daughter used some emotional tugs. I'm the only one. In other words, all the other moms have said yes, and I'm the only one that can't go. So a parent who's leading sticks to the few rules that they've created 100% of the time and doesn't care about outside approval. This is where the confidence comes in. Other moms, other kids, neighbors, whoever it is, when you have a rule, it's stuck to and it's not deviated from, because I am not going to show my kids that this type of negotiation works with me, because I don't want more of it, right? The more I let them try to push me and push my boundaries, the more I'm going to get pushback. And then I can't later wonder why I'm getting pushback and why I'm not being listened to, right? It starts from the very beginning. My behavior, they're reacting to me, whether it's yelling or whether it's relaxing rules, whatever it is, my child's reacting to me. Therefore, I'm the one that has to change my response. So now there is a time to negotiate and to talk about relaxing rules. So this is not black and white. And I'm going through this podcast and we're going through all the different steps. There's a whole method to my madness here. So like I said earlier, I'm not a robot. So sometimes I'm allowed to change my rules. Sometimes I'm allowed to vacillate back and forth. But again, I'm sticking to the 2 to 3. However, there is a time when I can relax a rule. That is when I'm having a training conversation. So I can have a training conversation about how freedom is earned through responsibility. The freedom and the responsibility is got to be tied to something I'm getting from the child, like chores or homework done or any effort on her part. And this conversation happens outside of the pressure of her negotiation. So when I'm being surprised in the middle of the day, oh, I want to go to this concert and I've already got a rule, I have no choice but to stick to that rule. Because if I negotiate, then that opens the door for further negotiation. Now, if I think to myself, I probably could start relaxing this rule. She's a sophomore. She's been responsible, whatever. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to have a training conversation with her in about a week. And that can happen at the time of my choosing based on the responsibility that my child has shown me. And any relaxing of a rule that you both agree on can occur at the next request. So for now, you're sticking to the rule and not validating the emotional guilt trips, and that, today remains a solid no. However, with teens especially, in the back of my mind, I can remember, all right, I think it's time to relax, or we're sticking to this for this week. But in about a week, we're going to sit down and have a conversation about how, hey, I've seen that you're getting up on time. I've seen that you've got a job, you're managing a lot of different things. I've seen how hard you work to help me out around the house. Any relaxing of a rule comes through a conversation at the time of my choosing as the parent, and based on something I'm getting from the child. They have to be performing in some way. It's not just willy-nilly, you've worn me down and now you get to go to the concert. It's about receiving something back and rewarding good, responsible behavior from the child. I've seen you've been acting more maturely. I see how awesome you are with your younger brother. You've been helping me out so much, picking up the kids from school, and you're always on time. I'm sorry we couldn't make it work for the concert last week, but moving forward, we can talk about if there's a big concert going on in the middle of the week. I think you've shown me how you've been able to handle X, Y, and Z. So I'm tying it to performance from the child, and it's handled at the time of my choosing, when I decide that she's earned more freedom. She has to earn that. So there is a time to negotiate. But up until then, my 2 to 3 real rules stay enforced. And this is how I get credibility, build trust, have my authority not, wiped out. And this is how we go forward, through the teen years of having my kids listen. My mom means it when she says it, right? So if your no can be bought from your child, your authority has already been sold. And that's sending mixed signals, and you'll be exploited for that. I have a personal story with one of my kids when they were in high school. And this is an interesting, this whole philosophy that we're talking about, this whole technique works in an interesting way. And there's a plot twist to the way that this works as to what I'm talking about. I had a rule, no concerts in the middle of the week. And in this particular instance, one of my kids was invited. He was in the lunchroom, and all the kids were bantering back and forth. They were all going to this concert, this rapper. And my kid did not want to go with these friends, and he didn't want to go to the concert, but he didn't want to say no. However, my child knew that I am not, you just don't, it's not happening if you're going to call me and ask me, anything. Like, I'm not breaking down. They knew they could count on me for my rules. So he called me on a speakerphone at lunch. Hey, mom, I'm here with blah, blah, blah. And I knew that he knew there was no way that, go ahead and try to sell me on this, but like, it's not happening. And this. Turns out he knew with confidence that my answer would be no. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to hang out with these people, but he didn't really have the courage in that moment at that stage to say, screw you, I don't want to go. So he thought it would be great to call me, but he had 100% assurance, confidence that when he called me, I was going to publicly on, speakerphone, shoot it down. And you can call me a bitch all day. My mom's such a bitch. Great. Sell me out, sell me under the bus. I don't care what you have to do, but rules are rules. And again, I'm only picking a couple, and I'm not deviating. So it's funny how when your kids can depend on you in that way, it's funny how that sort of transpires. That was kind of interesting because when he got home, he goes, "Yeah, I didn't really want to go." I was like, I figured.
Yeah, I think that's great because there is that piece where, kids are in that kind of weird middle situation where there's that social element that they might not want to say no or, feel alienated or, give reasons. So I do think that's a great way to not only like you said, he knew where you stood with that, but it also kind of gave him an out in a what probably would have felt like an awkward social situation at that particular developmental stage in life is when you're kind of feeling that. And then, later that can be like a conversation, moving forward of how to navigate those situations. So that's great because it was like kind of worked out for everyone really. I think I like
Yeah.
that story a lot.
Yeah, well, I never really could have predicted that that's how that would have been used, but I thought it was interesting. I was like, what? I was so suspicious when he called me. I'm like, what? Why is he doing this? And I was like, well, the answer is no, bro. Like, what are we doing right now? And like I said, I've always told the kids they can use me as an excuse, as a scapegoat. I don't give a crap what your friends think of me. Whatever it takes for you to get gracefully out of a situation, especially as a teenager when, like you said, things are awkward, sell me out all day long. I don't care. So, if you're finding that you have relaxed your rules, it has come to pass that you're not being listened to and that you're looking for some help rebuilding your credibility today, what can we do today? So first, I would say understand that your inconsistency is confusing and leading you not to be taken seriously. So those mixed signals do create the very behavior that's pissing you off. So first own that. First say, yep, it's, hi, my name's Sue and I'm being inconsistent and it's causing my kids to ignore me. And then second, I've said this the entire podcast, but it is such an effective tool, is that to figure out, decide what rules are most important to you and just pick 2 to 3, no more, 2 to 3. Once you have those established, you then, at a quiet time, not during the heat of an argument, not when anyone's asking you for anything, you have a family meeting or a little conversation with your child about your top rules, why those rules have been selected, why they matter to you, and then you get an agreement and understanding from your kids. So my rules are you'll be home at midnight, you're doing XYZ chores, and you're getting all your homework done by 8 o'clock. I don't know, whatever your rules are in your home, those are going to be changing. And you know what? If you want to change them every 2 weeks, that's up to you. Just select them. Don't go over 2 or 3. Communicate them, get your kids buy-in. That means I'm going to have a conversation with you at the kitchen table over some tea, coffee, whatever. I'm looking for the head nod. Yep. I get that I have to be home by midnight. Yep. We get buy-in. If they want to negotiate with that, that's the time where I'm allowing discussion and training. And if my kid wants to come back, when they get a little older, no, I want to be home at 2. Okay, I understand how you would feel that way. Of course you want to come home at 2. But you know what? Show me that you can come home at 11:30 first, and then we'll move to midnight. So it is a negotiation, but I hear you. We're having an agreement. We're establishing a conversation. And when I say, how about show me that you can get home at 11:30 for 3 weeks, and then we'll move on. And with again, I'm getting responses from my kids. I'm getting something back. It's not just me giving in. It's a mutual agreement. It's a partnership. You get the head nod. They agree. Okay, I understand your 2 to 3 rules. And dirty secret, you can use this. This is like PhD level tricks. When you work like this, you have the 2 to 3, you communicate it, you get your buy-in up front. One of the things that I used when the kids got older, which is so effective in this topic, is that I tell the kids, hey, I only have 2 to 3 rules. That's it. And here's what they are. First of all, that's not burdensome for the kids. So they're going to be apt to sort of stick with it, especially if you're getting buy-in and agreement. However, sometimes there were times where the kids would come back and they would argue with me about something, or someone else was able to do something else or whatever. I'm like, hey guys, remember, I don't have but just a couple of rules. Your friends are being burdened with all this, minutia of rules, and you're going to see other teen parents are just really drilling down and controlling. And I said, I'm giving you so much freedom. We only have 2 rules. I don't ask a lot of you. That was like such a huge statement. I don't ask a lot of you. You have a lot more freedom than your friends. So that's programming. And we'll get to that in a whole nother podcast. But you have so much more freedom. I'm not kidding you. Times 4 kids. Every single time I use that line, I got, yep, yeah, you're right. You're right. So now I'm part of the team, but yet we're circling back and still sticking to my 11:30 curfew. So it's amazing how that works. Here's what to remember if you're letting your child negotiate a boundary that was already set. They're learning how to outlast you and not respect you. So when you hold the line, it gives your kids room to grow, not room to roam, right? They're not just completely getting unlimited freedom, especially with tweens and teens. They can be in charge of the how, but you are always in charge of the if. So freedom is earned through responsibility. Their freedom is always tied to responsible behavior from their end. So if you find yourself arguing through every decision with your kids and being ignored, it's probably because your rules are inconsistent and your boundaries have been blurred. So let's wrap up today's podcast with a repeatable action plan. Number one, as you guys can probably guess, write down your top 2 to 3 non-negotiables. That's number one. Number two, have a calm conversation with your kid. Get clarity and buy-in on their understanding. You're looking for the head nod, you're looking for the agreement and the understanding. And then number three, follow through 100% of the time. And that is how you go from being for sale to being followed. Thanks for listening to the Ask Mom Parenting podcast. And this has been your parenting reboot, where we parent like leaders, not lifeguards. So if you liked what we had to say today and you want more strategies that actually work when you're tired and you're on your last nerve, join me in my free Facebook group, Yell Free Parenting for Exhausted Moms, or you can get weekly no BS parenting tips from my newsletter at askmomparenting.com.